And just like that, people were fighting over Allegri. He's just added an extra 0 onto his signing on bonus. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name's Rory. And he's back. We are joined by Andrea this week and Adam. We're going to start with Andrea. How we doing, man?
Good, yeah. I was a bit gutted last week that I wasn't feeling too well, but happy to be back here on the pod and speaking to you guys as always.
Back stronger, as they say on Instagram. Good to see you, mate. Adam, how are you doing, man?
Keeping very well. It's sunnier climates in the UK, so I even dared thinking about getting the barbecue out, but unfortunately, just realised didn't have the charcoal to do it. So never mind. It'll have to be postponed for another weekend. How about you, Rory? Though, how are things in Milan?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. Had a bit of a heavy weekend with the Arsenal Milano boys. We've got a flag and everything. It's looking pretty official at the minute. But yeah, it was a good weekend in general. I'm not as angry as the rest of the internet seems to be, so I feel like I'm winning. But in Serie A this week, an incredible weekend in Serie A. So many goals, so many big headlines. One of the horses very quickly dropped out of the title race that we insisted they weren't in the first place, but we do have a very close title race. We will be looking at that. Of course, we'll be starting in the Alianz, looking at Atalanta and their huge demolition of Juve. We'll be capping the comebacks from the Milan teams, as Inter and Milan both staged huge comebacks to keep their hopes alive, at least Inter. And then we'll talk a little bit about Fiorentina and Napoli, I suppose, but we'll delay it for Andrea's sake. But before we talk about Serie A, there are some stories we want to talk about firsthand. Now, Andrea, the first one, we need to keep up on all his movements, but pod favourite Pully. Did you see his appearance at Cagliari this weekend and the new cause that he's getting behind?
Yeah, I did, and I think he's finally found the right crowd to actually be around instead of being with the Cagliari players. So it's good to know that he's found his right crowd. But yeah, no, I guess it's a good cause. So fair play to Pully.
Yeah, good man, Pully.
He's pulling out all the stops.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to see him, not being verbally abused. It'd be difficult to verbally abuse him, I suppose, with that sign. But yeah, always good to see him still out there, Pully. And then, Adam, another kind of surprise appearance this weekend, I suppose, down in Serie B for Pisa. Now, unlike his dad, he operates mainly on the left wing. But Louis Buffon made his debut for Pisa. Just how surprised were you that he's not a goalkeeper? I honestly thought he could only be a goalkeeper.
I think it shocks everyone, didn't it? That the fact or the virtue that he isn't a goalkeeper in his daddy's kind of footsteps. But I think what's even more baffling is the fact that he could qualify for the Czech Republic. He's been called up as a potential player for the under-21s already. He's already been a suitor for the Italian squad, but apparently through his mother, who qualifies because she's a Czech-born national, so that's how he qualifies. So you wouldn't have necessarily associated Buffon as a Czech name, but potentially Czechia might have a Buffon playing for them, and wasn't unfortunately the greatest of debuts for Louis Buffon because his side went on to lose to Spezia 2-1. So yes, it is what it is, but it's great to see him make an appearance nonetheless, Rory.
If we see Buffon in a Czech Republic shirt, I think that might be another case of utter woke nonsense. I don't like this. It should only ever be Buffon on the back of an Italy shirt. It doesn't feel right. No. I don't think. But guys, those were the stories that caught our eye this week. We're now going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we'll be starting in Turin. We'll see you there. Benvenuti, bentornati. Here we go. It's time to discuss all the Serie A happenings starting in Turin as we had Juventus 0, Atalanta 4. Arguably one of the biggest shock results of this season so far in terms of, I don't think anybody saw this coming. But Andrea, just how surprised were you with how easy this was for Atalanta and the kind of statement of that win?
I think it's a bit of both. I feel like on one side, Juventus have always had this issue where they've become a bit stale in certain moments of games. They rode a lot of luck in a lot of matches this season, drawing a lot of games. And I think Atalanta on their day can do that to any team. So in the end, I'm not too surprised, but I just think what is the surprise, obviously, is the manner and the fact that what we'll get on to with the fans as well are leaving the stadium. So it's just the sense of pure low that Juventus felt for that game. probably the lowest I think Juventus have ever been for a long time. I've seen. So I think that's the key thing. But Atalanta again, just incredible that they can just do that to any team. Just the front four, Lookman, just quality, and in the end they didn't give any Juventus any space, nothing. Just all Atalanta the whole game.
Does it not make it more frustrating that last week they drew 0-0 with Venezia and now they're doing this to Juventus? It might be the most Atalanta run of results ever, right? And this is kind of where the problem lies for Atalanta. They get these big statement wins against the top teams, but then they're not really beating the teams they should be, right? It just feels very on brand.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue where it's like almost like, are you in a title race or you're not? Like, do you want to be in it or do you not want to be in it? And I think that's what I would, if I was an Atalanta fan, I think that's what I'd be questioning. Like, your head must be going like, what's going on? But yeah, but amazingly, they're only 3 points behind despite these results. But it also goes to show if they did pick up these results, that they could have potentially been in the leading Serie A. So, but I think the main thing with their respect that there was a point where they looked out of it, and the fact that they're still in it is good to see. So it looks like it's going to be a three-way tie for the title, which will be fascinating, hopefully.
No, absolutely, and we want them to be in as long as they possibly can. But Adam, like before we talk and go full autopsy on Juve, we do need to give credit to Atalanta. Darun in particular, his performance caught the eye. Like when he's able to dominate midfield completely, he really does dominate. And also the Zappacosta with an incredible goal, and Kolasinac rolling back the years. Just incredible performances across the pitch, right?
Yeah, absolutely incredible. I mean, we will talk about how lethargic and poor Juventus were because they made it easy for Atalanta. But as Andreas said, Atalanta come into these games and they can dominate the game itself, with the kind of combination of different traits that they've got within this squad, players like Edison who are so powerful in the attacks, for example. You're right to allude to the likes of Zappacosta, who was superb, really terrorised the kind of left back, if you can call it a left back, because Timothy Weah wasn't really there. And I think that was part of the reason why Yildiz was brought off at half time, because Cook Miners was brought in his place to shore up that midfield. I don't know what he actually did because I didn't notice him for 45 minutes anyway. And, with the kind of strike force that Atalanta have, as Andrea alluded to, Lookman was fantastic. He was just purring at every moment that he got, opportunity-wise. Retegui looks really up for it. Across the board, as you say, there was no faultless performances. They were all incredible in their own rights. Even Carnesecchi, when he had to be called upon, was really solid. So, yeah, I mean, great performance from an Atalanta point of view, but as you right to allude to as well, why can't they be this consistent when they're playing the likes of a Venezia, for example, or Calgary, for example? So they need to bring those kind of performances to those games. But yeah, without a shadow of doubt, a lot of credit has to go to Gianpiero Gasperini and this squad because they made it look easy at times against Juventus.
Well, then, is it actually a bit of good news that Atalanta's fixtures coming up are all absolutely huge games? Because their next run of games, they've got Inter at home, then they've got Fiorentina away, Lazio at home, Bologna at home, Milan away, and then it kind of eases off a little bit, Lecce and Monza. But those next 5 games are all against big, decent sides. Could this actually be a time where Atalanta kind of continue to step up and maybe find a bit of consistency now that they're all big games? Or is this where it unravels?
I mean, potentially you could argue that actually it gives them something to focus on because there's no kind of periods where they can afford to rest and defocus for those games. They have to bring their kind of game plan to those games. I think they will give tough kind of performances against certain sides, maybe take advantage of Inter, especially with their kind of injury crisis that seems to be building by the game week. But yeah, I think you could argue that Atalanta are in great shape at the moment because if you're talking about their kind of performances against those kind of top 6, top 7 teams, they generally seem to dominate. So this could be a fortunate run for them going forward and maybe build some momentum as well because like you say, at the back end, they've got the likes of Lecce. They'll know at that point where they stand and potentially where they need to maybe make some points for the rest of the season.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we know that Inter have not really impressed in any of the big games so far this season. So it'll be really, really interesting to tie that one. Andrea, do you see Atalanta continuing through this run? I think there's obviously some tricky games, but do you think they could be up to it?
I think definitely they can. I mean, we've seen it with these type of games, these dominant performances. It's just whether they can sustain that kind of intensity in these games. That's the only thing I'd question, because sometimes, like we've seen in the Venezia game, they have a drop off. And I think that's happened a bit too much this season that likely they would have wanted. So my only question would be that, but on their day, yes, they can beat any of those teams comfortably. So it's just whether they can sustain it.
Nice. Well, listener, if you are a betting man, I would say bet on them to remain undefeated up until that Lecce game where they will lose. I think that's where the smart money is for that one. But let's actually focus on Juve. It's the elephant in the room. Andrea kind of said it at the top of the show, the lowest that he's ever seen Juventus, possibly. But Adam, it feels like this has kind of been building up towards Motta. The unhappiness has been there for a very long time. There was a few results and a few kind of results more than performances that papered over the cracks. Mm. He's come out with some statements after the game and said, the players aren't playing up to it. He's made some pretty strong statements post-match. Is this the end for him? Is Allegri currently meeting in a restaurant in Turin somewhere? What do you think's happening?
I think the noises are going to get louder, that's for sure. Motta, I think you started to see maybe a sentiment yesterday in the press conferences and what he said to the media of him showing his stress, maybe, realizing the situation that he's in right now. In one hand, I do feel for him because I don't think this is necessarily the squad ready for him. It's not what he wanted to implement. But on the other hand, you kind of look at the performances like yesterday and you kind of think, well, have Juventus actually evolved? Have they moved on? And this was the whole project. This was all about kind of bringing the footballing philosophy that he instilled at Bologna into this Juventus squad. And look, bar a few signatures, obviously, I think you could argue that he's got the majority of the players that he's wanted, and he's, dictated the style of football. But I think it's gone wayward halfway through the season, ever since they kind of just started drawing results and maybe not getting the wins, especially at home. There's been a few results where they've been drawing unnecessary games, the likes of Calgary spring to mind, where, they had it pretty much under control. But I think the problem is you've also got players that are waiting to be transitioned out of the club, the likes of Dusan Vlahovic, that clearly don't fit, really. There's always been this unknown with Weston McKennie. We don't really know where he sits in this squad as well. That's just two examples where you think, well, he hasn't really found out the kind of play or place for those individuals. Nicky Gonzalez seems to be hit and miss and deployed in different positions. And I already alluded to Cop Miners that he's been absolutely terrible when he's been brought in from Atalanta. I don't think he's had enough scrutiny. If his name isn't like, for example, Douglas Luiz, I think he gets far greater scrutiny. But there's been some questionable drop-offs as well. The likes of Cambiasso as well is another one that, ever since that kind of January period where he was quoted as potentially going on to Man City, I don't think I've seen anything from him since that period. So there's been some questionable performances from those that have been in form. So, I think everything points towards Motta. I think he will survive it initially, but if results continue in the same vein where also the scrutiny of not being in the top four, which will be financially really terrible for a Juventus point of view, then I think they might trigger the return of Allegri, it's fair to say.
They'll be hitting that red panic button soon, I think. But, Andrea, isn't this kind of the issue with Motta as well? And Adam kind of alluded to it there, but we still don't know, or he still doesn't know what his best 11 is. He still doesn't know where he really wants players to play. It feels like he's not been figuring anything out across this whole time. The whole time I've been like, okay, they hired a long-term manager. This is a long-term project. They're looking to change how the club functions and everything about the club. This is a really ambitious project, but kind of making excuses for him, expecting him to kind of learn those lessons and pick something up along the way. But there just hasn't been enough improvement, if any, and zero consistency.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you look at the players that he's playing as well, I just question some of the selections as well. You're like, you see Yildiz not starting all the games, and I'm just like, he's the best player. He needs to start every game.
Yeah.
You've got like Gonzalez playing on the left. He can't play there. Vlahovic coming on can't really get a difference. So there's got a lot of players that he needs to transition out or try and fit into a better system. But on top of that, I still think he still needs to look at the kind of players coming in. I feel like he might need a further season just to get some more players in because, again, the players he has there at his disposal as well don't really suit it too much either. Having said that, like Adam was saying, players like Koopmeiners who should have been stepping up haven't, and I think that's the concern. When you've got these big money signings, Douglas Luiz, players like that haven't fitted in, another manager could fit them in. And I think that's where the board could be like, well, we've signed these quality players. Another manager could bring them out, the best out of them. Why don't we change? So I think that's the worry he gets. But I do think in his mind, he's thinking, if I just can get to the end of the season and then kind of start again. And I think it will be based on that. Honestly, I think if he doesn't get the Champions League, I think he gets sacked. If he gets the Champions League, he'll get a further opportunity. But it just all seems to come down to whether he can not get these embarrassing results as much and kind of hide in the shadow, get Champions League and start all over again. But I think there's still a lot of question marks, and I could see possible change as well. And like Adam said, it could be a panic thing back to Allegri again. But it would question a lot the board and their mentality, the fact that they want to change his philosophy. And I think it would be such a, not that disrespect to Allegri, because Allegri's a good coach, but it would kind of be a backward step in terms of what they want to progress in the future. And I think that's what's kind of on the board's mind as well. So I don't think they want to sack him too much either. So I think there's a lot of controversy in that sense. But also, I think the big issue, just wanted to add as well, is that he hasn't been back properly. When you think about it, yes, Kyle Moani was a good signing, but Lloyd Kelly, come on. We're talking like, no offense to Lloyd Kelly, like he's a good player. He's
I'm sure he's a lovely lad.
He's not good enough.
He's just not good enough. And again, that game, shambolic, the goals. Vlahovic slip. I know it happens, but still, McKennie, I don't know what he's doing playing volleyball. You have what was it as well? Lloyd Kelly with the pass.
Lloyd Kelly.
It's embarrassing, and I think that's where you're like, and that's what can cost him a job. So that's something that he's got to stamp out immediately, because that's not Juventus standards.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and it is the moment of truth for the board. Are they going to stick with this project, or are they just going to pull it up and go, no, we can't, we actually don't have the metal to get through this. We need to just, because I think this is the moment of truth now. They either say, no, we're going to see this through fully and we believe in this project, or they go back and they say, no, you know what, we were happy with Allegri just getting us over the line and it's winning that matters. I think we're about to see how much they believe in this project. But yeah, Adam, a lot of players there, as Andrea said, just not reaching the levels. Even players like Locatelli have had a quiet season, but he's still not pushing on. Like, Colomwani's come in and instantly been like the best player in that squad. Like, there is still a real lack of quality here. Like, so no matter who comes in, you might get a more pragmatic approach with Allegri and you might get a few more 1-0s. But no matter what happens, this squad still needs gutting and remaking. So the board are going to have to do this at some point. They can't just keep kicking this can down the road. So is the biggest problem ultimately the owners and the club?
They are partly to blame. I think, in the whole scheme of how it's come to this place now, obviously they're paying for the old board's decisions. Unfortunately, they're having to go out from that period. I think the fact that they're still being taken to court by Cristiano Ronaldo is all you need to know about the scenario of where Juventus are, that they're not in a great financial standing, and they can't afford to make these costly decisions going forward. And this is why they're having to bring in players like Lloyd Kelly, because they haven't got any real answers to kind of stem that kind of short-termism and kind of think about the strategic kind of long-term aspects as well. So I think if you sack Motta, you're going to cost yourself some further money. I don't know if they can afford to do so. So I think their hands will be like really tied in this respect. But I think there will be pressure, or at least conversations with Motta to maybe start thinking pragmatically about the style of football, really. That's for me where the obvious answers lie, is that they're far too open against Atalanta, didn't show any fight. And I think that's got to be the things that Motta has to work on, is that, it's fine that you can argue that the squad isn't there, but actually the first thing you do then is you have a reaction. You kind of try and make sure that the next game you're not going to be beaten as easily. I think that's probably the frustration maybe Juventus fans are kind of showcasing by yesterday, when they kind of left the stands pretty much after the fourth goal went in, was they've had enough. They've had enough of the fact that the players aren't displaying that kind of passion and determination for their budge and the club itself. And I wonder if Motta is being a bit too stubborn with his philosophy now. And it's got to a point where he's now struggling for ideas. So for me, it naturally just feels like it needs changing up. But whether he's got the voices behind the scenes, I don't know. I mean, when we were just thinking about it right now and suggesting that potentially he gets sacked, if it's not Allegri, for example, there aren't many candidates out there that could potentially step in. The only one that springs to mind because of his connections with Juventus would be Igor Tudor, because I think he will still be held in high esteem because of that period when he was there with Andrea Pirlo. And I think people will actually recognize that actually it was more Tudor in terms of the way that they're playing at that point than it was Pirlo dictating it. So potentially that might give them a bit more solace. And I think, Tudor is someone that understands the brand of Juventus and probably gets what the fans need right now. So that seems like the cheaper or alternative right now. But do I think that's a long-term piece? I don't think so. But again, like you say, there's got to be a lot held to accountable to the likes of Giuntoli for the way that he's kind of sat silently on his hands, not helping the club courses. And ultimately, he's the one that's making these deals as well. It's not Motta.
We
Motta
told you, he's Napoli's secret agent. He's there to bring it down from the inside.
Exactly. But legitimately, he's the one that's spending this kind of, or trying to negotiate these deals. So if you're thinking 60 million on cup miners at the time, did they need that? Did they need that with the grand scheme of things? When you had Fagioli, for example, still at the club, they had an abundance of midfielders. Sure, they're not good enough, but yeah, I think they bought, or they were hoodwinked by cup miners because of the season he had under Gasperini, and I bet Gasperini is laughing at the moment.
I think there's a thing about buying players from Atalanta. I need to fully form.
Just don't buy them. Just don't buy them.
They never do as well when they leave. I think there's they very rarely, because I can't think of every single one, but they very rarely leave Atalanta and do better or as well. I think there's something there. But yeah, Andrea, last thing on Juve, I suppose. The fans did leave early. It's very rare you see fans leave a stadium in Italy, really. They might do the protests at the beginning, but it's very rare you see the place empty out. I know the Alianz is a bit of a pain in the arse to get to. It's in the middle of nowhere and it's cold and it's raining. But it is a huge statement that the fans just decided, we've had enough. Do you think this does put even more pressure on the board for them to make a decision now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think precisely because it's never really happened. I think it was brewing for a while, and now this is the final blow kind of thing. And like I said, it's a humiliation. And I think again, it was the worst defeat they had since 1967. I think it was the year. So again, it just shows the levels of how bad this result really was. And I think the board really now, they're going to hear that. They're going to see that. They're going to feel that. The players are going to feel it. The manager's going to feel it. So it's the response is key now. But again, it's a very hard thing to come back from. Losing your fans is a massive issue going forward. So we'll have to wait and see. But the key now is how they respond to it, and do they put a good performance in? Do they, give the fans some hope again? We'll have to wait and see. But certainly, from the board perspective, I just presume they're going to stay quiet as always, and then wait to the end of the season. So it's on the players and manager, unfortunately, to respond to these fans. But they're rightly so to leave. I don't blame them. I think it was that bad. Yeah. They had to do it.
Grim times up in Turin, but we do have to say auguri one more time to Atalanta. Just an incredible win, absolute statement, massive win in Turin. Absolutely love that. We're going to leave that game there for now, and we're going to go to the first of the Milan teams to stage a huge comeback, and we're going to start with the black and blue of Inter. And now, Adam, I thought with us, all our talk about Monza being the worst team in Serie A history, I thought, oh, we've done it again. We've jinxed it. They're going to win now, and they're going to put egg all over our face. But thankfully, Inter woke up and managed to get this done. But how the hell did Inter find themselves 2-0 down to Monza at home?
Through a gritty and determined output from Monza. You know, a lot of credit has to go to them for the way they approached it. Granted, you know, the first goal was on the counter-attack. Burindelli kind of runs down the wing and takes on his man before he slots it past Josip Martinez in the Inter goal. But a lot of credit has to go to Keita. Before that goal, he was kind of dictating the tempo, having efforts from distance. And, you know, it looks like it was brewing. But when that goal goes in, it was an absolutely phenomenal hit. There was a reaction that was shown from the bylines just behind where the Monza bench was. And you could see their kind of hands going up in the air, kind of grasping their heads, like amazement at what they were seeing, essentially. But that hit by Balde was absolutely insane. And at 2-0, you're like, with 4 minutes before half time, this couldn't have been a better position for Monza and Alessandro Nesta. And you're kind of thinking to yourself, why haven't Monza kind of displayed this for the majority of the season? Because any of this would have been, you know, a benefit to their season. But yeah, Inter kind of woke up, and, you know, it needed just a goal before halftime to just help them get back into it. And Arnautovic scores from a corner. Bit fortuitous because I think there was cause for handball in the incident, but they managed to get away with it, and yeah, it helps them to kind of get back into the game. You know, Lautaro at that moment as well, he had efforts that again kind of went wayward before that point, and yeah, a lot of credit has to go to Monza because at that point they really did dominate that first 45 minutes without being spectacular. They did what they had to, went about their business in the right manner, and they earned it at that point, Rory. But second half, all Inter, they came back into it, and bar a few shaky moments where Monza kind of broke, pretty much under control from an Inter perspective, but more worries about players that have gone off injured as well. The likes of Zielinski, for example, being brought off. DeMarco now today potentially being called out as maybe missing the Azzurri call up in March as well. So there's probably some more issues for Inter going forward, but we have to also call out Çalhanoğlu for the second goal, was a phenomenal hit as well.
Well, I think him returning to the team is going to be a huge boost, and if he can get some like regular minutes in his legs and become like a steady presence, they're going to be a much, much better team all round. I think when I saw Keita Balde got the second, I was like, this might be the most Pazza Inter moment, like the ex-player turning up and making sure they lose at home. Like it was kind of, I think Inter fans wouldn't have been too surprised. But Andrea, it's just massive for Inter to get this over the line. We know Monza have been pretty terrible, but they did come back. They did get it done. Is this kind of, because of the scoreline, because of the way it's come about, is this a more useful win to Inzaghi than a routine 3-0 win at home? Like the fact they've had to fight, they've had to put the yards in, and they can believe in themselves. Do you feel like there's a bit more use to that in the squad?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that goal before our time was crucial, I think, in the turnaround. I think you just felt it as soon as they scored that goal for our time that they were going to have that resurgence second half. And they've done this quite a few times under Inzaghi. So I think that's good that they still have that in them. I think the only concern is what Adam was like alluding to, is the fact that there's quite a few injury kind of concerns now. Fatigue. Zielinski now apparently out for 2.5 months, which almost the end of the season pretty much, which is a massive blow, I think, because him coming on can make a difference in certain games as well. So I think Martinez looks fatigued as well, Thuram as well. So I think the concern is the whole kind of fitness of the squad at the moment. I think that's the only thing that I'd say. Other than that, yes, I think they've still got the quality, and also that win will be useful, obviously, and important going forward.
Very, very, like, just a huge win for Inter. I also love the Bissek quote afterwards, where he's like, they were asking him why he passed and didn't shoot. He's like, have you seen me shoot? I didn't want to hurt anyone in the crowd, so I decided to pass it on, which I absolutely love. But he's a player that's come on and been really important when he has come on in the past. But yeah, Adam, the thinness of this squad, we have remarked on it. They are still in the Champions League. They do still have big games coming up. How does Inzaghi get them through this? How does he get them through this now?
I think we've started to see signs of it on that particular match against Monza when you're seeing the likes of Joaquin Correa being used as a Mazzella these days. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they see this through. I think arguably they probably have to focus on one competition and that's it, because I can't see them being able to sustain it for both. If they do somehow manage to get to like the latter stages of the Champions League and the league are still within kind of touching distance of winning it, then they go for it. Unfortunately, they have to go for it. But I feel like, as you allude to, the depth isn't there. They haven't got the quality to bring off the bench. It's going to require a lot of these players that haven't played to up their levels, I feel. The likes of Asalani probably has to play a little bit more often. There has to be a rotation. And
remember him?
Yeah, I know. We forget about him being in the squad, right? But there's a clear disliking to him. Clearly, there's a disconnect with him, and inevitably it feels like he'll be gone in the summer as well, just to raise some funds for Inter's pot of trying to get the next kind of best thing coming through, I suppose. But yeah, there is some serious question marks, I think, aimed at maybe Inzaghi in terms of that pre-season. Did he work them too hard? And get, to that point, this is why they're seeing some, injuries of late. They look lethargic, they look tired, and they just need a rest. Unfortunately, it just feels like they need the season to end now rather than in a few months' time. So I don't know how they see it out, and unfortunately, you might see the likes of Arnautovic being kept on because they can't afford to maybe move him off. So yeah, it's going to be interesting next few months, but I think the pressure is on the Inter to kind of maintain it, and I feel sorry for that group of players because it feels like there'll be some more injuries to come.
Well, the good news is they've got the Club World Cup this summer, so they'll get that rest in 2027. I'm not sure when the next time is they're going to get to sit down. But obviously next week they've got that big game against Atalanta away, Udinese at home, and then it's straight into the Milan derby in the Coppa Italia. Like, there's some pretty big games coming up for them. They're going to have to get through these somehow, but the important thing is that they're just getting the 3 points, getting that goal, getting the result in the bag. I would be intrigued to see if we do actually get to see Fratesi at any point, because he's a player that can still do a job, but they very much, I'm not sure how well Inzaghi's managed that situation. Now, we don't know what's going on in the background. Like, it looked like he was going to go to Roma in January, then he didn't. But even before that, he was barely getting on the pitch. He was barely getting any minutes. And I feel like to now throw him in and expect any level of performance, you're going to be struggling. Like, Andrea, do you think Inzaghi earlier on in the season could have been better at rotating his squad maybe and kind of keeping players feeling more involved?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen it quite a few teams this season around the leagues that when you do that, it can backfire in the end. And I think sometimes it's not necessary either. Like, they have the quality enough to put those players out there and win those games. But also, I kind of think Inzaghi as well is someone that doesn't really trust a lot. And I think that could be an issue. It always seems to be like he has to revert to a certain 11 to win these games. So it's just having him to have to be a bit more flexible in that sense. However, I do agree with the general consensus that the squad is quite thin, and I think that doesn't help either when they have to rely on Arnautovic and Correa on the bench when Correa makes his random appearance once every 2 months. So it's like that's where you're like, if he's backed a bit more, perhaps he can do it. But I still think Inzaghi's is a bit stubborn, so he's probably got to be a bit less and try and be more flexible.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to see what this Oak Tree Fund of what their plans are this summer and how invested they are, because we've not really seen them in a transfer market yet. So in this summer, it'll be interesting to see what approach they take. But yeah, he's going to have to work some miracles at this point, I think. And selfishly, just for my Fantacalcio, I hope we see Davide Fratesi at some point, because I spent quite a lot of money on him. But Inter did get the win. Monza are still searching for those extra points. I'm not wishing bad luck on them, but I really want us to be right about something. So I hope they break the record. It would be nice for us to be right about something. But let's leave that one there and let's go to the other side of Milan, where there was another huge comeback, this time down in... No, I was going to say Puglia. My girlfriend will shout at me in Salento. It's not Puglia. As Lecce raced into a 2-goal lead, that guy Kustovic, the second goal in particular, I think it's the second goal, is an absolute rocket outside of the right foot. Beautiful finish. to give Lecce a 2-goal lead. Let's talk about Lecce first before we talk about Milan. Adam, Krstovic is now on 10 goals this season. I think I want to say 6 or 7 assists as well. He's really having his big breakout season. Without taking him off Lecce already, it does feel like he's going to be making a move this summer, right? And another club's going to be picking him up.
You'd like to think so. I think if Lecce can keep hold of him anyway, certainly, then they've done really good business in terms of keeping him. He's been a hell of a kind of standout for them this season. We knew there was something about him last season, but there was always a question mark about his consistency. The fact that he's starting to step up to these bigger games, score the important goals. I still feel there's an element of he still needs to work on his kind of balance in front of goal. Sometimes, easily he should have had a hat trick in this game, to be fair. And, that's probably the only criticism that I'd probably say aim at him, as well as the composure, that's all he lacks. But there is a case to say, look, a team that's outside of maybe the top 4, top 3 could do well to keep or get hold of his services. I right now, when I look at even Milan or, Inter in the scenario that they're in, he wouldn't be a bad option to bring off the bench. He wouldn't be someone that I would be, downhearted in terms of quality. I think he adds something different to them, especially when you need someone that knows the league and can play at this level.
He's better than Correa and bloody Jovic or whatever.
Exactly.
If you know what I mean?
I mean, if you look at even Milan, for example, they really haven't got any options. Tammy Abraham, I think he's better than Tammy. Jimenez had a really quiet game against Lecce. So, he's been phenomenal. Helped by the players that are behind him as well. Perotti, for example, Moriente as well, who we've mentioned a few times on this pod as well. They have been the impetus for them. And remember last season, there was Amphis, for example. So, there is some quality players in this Lecce squad. And, we have to credit the way that they went about the business, because, they were down already 1-0 within 47 seconds, I think it was recorded at the time, but it was obviously ruled out for offside. 6 minutes later, essentially, Krstovic gets the first one. And then in the second half, Krstovic adds to that second one. But before that moment, Milan had opportunities again, Gabbia heading home again, and that was disallowed for being offside as well. So, it wasn't for the lack of trying from a Milan perspective. But certainly, when you're 2-0 down and, Sergio Conceição alluded to the fact, it took a lot of determination and grit from their side to get themselves back into the game. And a lot of credit has to go to the group of players. But I think overall, when you look at the kind of way that a lot of those players played on the night, they were absolutely terrible, some of them, absolutely shambolic.
Well, it was a really weird game, because in my head I was like, it was kind of comfortable for Lecce, but then you're like, well, no, because Milan did have 2 goals disallowed, where if they timed their runs better, they would have been 2-0 ahead. So you think, was it comfortable? I don't know, but then it did seem quite comfortable by Lecce, that the players were like, yeah, we can do this all day. And Milan were so poor. Before we move on to Milan, I'm glad you shouted at Perotti, because I thought he was absolutely fantastic, and he always looks super lively. I was really impressed with him. And the midfielder Koulibaly and Berisha as well played really well. I feel like Lecce really were able to play the game on their terms and keep Milan at arm's distance, really. But then Milan continue to do this, and Andrea, this is... If they don't like the manager, they're definitely playing for him, because they are coming back a lot and leaving it late. This is I want to say the 3rd or 4th time this season now, just off the top of my head, that I think of a game where it looks like it's done, it's over. The Lazio game the other week, whatever it is, Venezia at home before that, and you think this game's done, and somehow they come back into it. I just remembered they lost the Lazio game, but they did come back into it. But a lot of the games, they are still fighting till the last minute. So there is something there in this squad that they can't do it over 90 minutes, but there's still a bit of quality. They're just a very confusing team.
Very confusing. It's like they play better when they're losing. It's a weird situation. But they are. I think, again, one of the other games was Parma as well, where they scored in the last second, literally last
That's
second.
it, exactly, the Parma game.
So they've had these comeback wins, which is, to be honest, is impressive. It shows good mentality-wise, that they can stick at it and not give up. And not give up attitude, which is great. However, I think obviously there's bigger problems. It still doesn't really. It just papers over the cracks. Even this result, I think some of the players. I think the biggest drop off for me has to be Reinders. I mean, we spoke about him last week, and again gave away for the goal as well. And I think when you've got that big player that was being the massive part of your team going forward, not doing well, it then obviously others need to step up. And yes, Pulisic this time stepped up, but there's also always players not stepping up, and there's a lot of concern. You got to look at players as well, like Bondo didn't have a great game. It was his top debut. Unfortunately, because I really like him, I think he's a great player. But unfortunately, whether it's the system or something, he just got out of depth that game. Hopefully he comes back stronger. But there's just quite a lot of decisions in the squad where they've got to look at it. I think Walker's kind of thing has kind of died down as well now. I feel like he's been found out a bit as well now. He's starting to get found out a bit. Arguably he was the worst player on the pitch actually over Bondo, to be honest. But so I think overall, yes, they've got that mentality, but I just think selection-wise and the players around them, the players they've got, the players they've signed, Sotil coming on is not going to do anything. Like I think they've set themselves up for a season where it's just going to go probably adrift. I think, which is a shame because they've got a good certain players, but it just seems like it's just going to fall flat at some point.
Well, this is it, and they're always within 5 minutes of falling flat on their face, but somehow they manage to pull it out of the fire. And but Adam, so the fight begins for Allegri. Juve are making winky faces at him, and Milan are making winky faces at him. It seems now that Conceição, it's week by week, is what has kind of been leaked / briefed to the press in terms of his future. He barely reacted to any of the goals because I think it would be shameless to celebrate any of them, I'll be honest. But it feels like he's on the brink as well. Like, how much longer can this go on? Even when it looks like the season, nothing's going to happen. There's nothing to lose. Just get it done, write it off. Like, I know we keep having this conversation, but like, do you think they stick with him or they just get Allegri in?
Something tells me they will stick with him. I just think they realise that they can't carry on changing managers. Like they've done it 3-4 times now. It's getting to a point where you can't kind of change a manager and think that's going to have that instant impacts and change what you're trying to achieve here. But equally, I think there's, rightly as well, accusations aimed at Conceição for the way that he's kind of, picked his team, for example, maybe the tactics that he's deployed. I think you have to give him the summer, personally. I've always maintained you have to give him the summer to see out this job and bring in his own players, because I don't think necessarily these are his players. I don't think, as much as you can kind of say, like, there is some talented players here, I don't think they all work together, not for the system that Conceição wants. But again, I think there's a huge amount of finger pointing towards the board in terms of the way that it's strategized. When you think back in the day when they had Paolo Maldini running that kind of area and trying to get the next kind of generation coming through, they never really saw it through because they never put that trust into him, despite the fact that he was saving the money every season, cutting the wage bill. And this was with a better set of players. I think if you compare now, this is a shadow of that kind of philosophy. And I think they've got to look at maybe a bit more at home, but I don't think it will ever happen under Cardinale. Until he gets bought out as a majority shareholder, I can't see it happening. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure still that will continue. And unfortunately, that toxicity will continue as, the fans will resent this club ownership at the moment. And, we already alluded to the fact that what does Zlatan do? He's not even employed by the club by all accounts. He's just someone that's employed by the group ultimately to be a figurehead. So I think that's your problem, is that you've got people that don't actually have a responsibility for this situation. So I think that's where you've got to look at it, is someone has to control what's going on from a kind of footballing side of things, and someone has to own the business side of things as well. And the two are getting mixed up, it feels, at the moment. And, from a playing perspective, I don't know. You even look at the next gen group that they've tried to kind of build up at the moment. It's not really coming to fruition right now.
I
I
think the
don't know
bottom
where
of
they go
Serie
from here.
C. I think they're
Yeah,
at the bottom of
they're
Serie C.
struggling. They're really struggling at the moment.
Yeah, it's not looking good. But they've accidentally stumbled across some gems. Like they've brought in Jimenez, and he's been really good since he came in. But even the goals are drying up a little bit for him. I always get confused between Jimenez, and I always remember which one is the decent one and which one isn't. But they have stumbled across some kind of a few gems. It is definitely more by accident than by design, I feel like. But yeah, again, this is another win, and you're like, okay, Pulisic has had some huge moments in the Milan shirt already. Like since as a signing, he's been very, very successful. The second they got that first goal, I was kind of like, okay, and this is where Lecce absolutely fold in now and give it away. And that's what happened. But we do have to say it is a big win for Milan because at 2-0 down, it was looking like kind of they might have been the headline before Juve stepped up, right? But they did really get the job done. So, yeah, kind of Conceição stumbles on for another week. We'll see if we're still talking about him next week. But let's go to the last game that we're going to look at in depth today. Kind of in depth. We've not got much time. Andrea, take us through Napoli to Fiorentina 1. Huge, huge win for Napoli. You turned off at a certain point.
Yeah, I think seriously Lukaku scored, to be honest, but I think the style play again, it was just very lethargic, no energy, no desire from Fiorentina's perspective, and then but Napoli were cruising just because Fiorentina were just playing the way they normally do, which is doing nothing. But I think the goals that Napoli had, they took really well. Second half, yes, Gudmundsson scored a great goal. Moise Kean, great flick. But that's it. Like you have that moment, and then the rest of it, Napoli should have scored more. I think that De Gea, although like he made a massive mistake and stuff before, he makes these saves. It could have been a harsher scoreline. So, but I think Napoli overall deserved the win. I think Raspadori again chipping into the goal, which is good to see. I really like to see him score more as well because I think he just needs to play. He's a good player, just needs to play. So it's great to see. I think overall for Napoli, just ends that run of like not getting a win. And it just should give them a big confidence. I think the reaction of the players at full time showed a lot of how much it meant to them again and what it could mean for the rest of the season. So big win, and yeah, confident performance in the end, I think, from majority of the players on the pitch for Napoli.
Yeah, Adam, it definitely felt like it was much more what we expect from Napoli. As Adam said, Raspadori and Lukaku scoring, bit of a partnership maybe conformed towards the end of the season.
Yeah, definitely. Raspadori again, kind of showing his credentials. Yeah, he looks a hell of a player on the day. He was just so menacing against that Fiorentina defense. He just looked like he was the Raspadori that we knew of old, when he was at Sassuolo, for example. And he does need that partnership. We did allude to that factor, but I think the fact that Napoli have been forced into this kind of playing certain individuals and the system. It's definitely benefiting him. I thought we saw a really good performance from Spinazzola. I think he was really threatening down that left-hand side. Scott McTominay again, kind of with his kind of tenacity of getting into the box and having shots from distance as well, really threatened that Fiorentina back line. And yeah, generally, I think there's a lot of credit to the way that Napoli responded to the results of recent. Billy Gilmour, again, another assured performance as well from a midfield perspective. So I think generally some really positive signs from a Napoli perspective. And Conte alluded to the fact that he's loving his time at Napoli now. He's loving trying to put displays on, as he put in his own words, for this crowd. And that's what they certainly did against Fiorentina. Word on Fiorentina, though, it just looks like a hell of confidence is swayed out this squad at the moment. Just feels like they don't know what to do now. Obviously, Andrea knows from that midweek performance in the Europa Conference against Panathinaikos. It felt like they were dumbfounded and really just kind of transitioned into this game. They really just looks a shadow of what we've seen of Fiorentina in the mid kind of period of the season. I say worrying times for Fiorentina now.
Yeah, they need to arrest that slide pretty quick. They need to arrest it pretty quick. But we're going to very quickly take you through the other fixtures before we head into the next round of fixtures. Very quickly, Cagliari drew 1-1 with Genoa. Cornet scoring for Genoa. Great to see him on the score sheet. Como drew 1-1 with Venezia. 95th minute penalty for Venezia to equal that game. Ikone, ex-La Viola, getting a goal for Como. Love to see that. Parma drew 2-2 with Torino. Elmas getting another goal.
Yep.
Been such a big impact for them since he's come in. But Pellegrino getting 2 goals for Parma to share the points there. Hellas Verona, they scored in the 80th minute. They got a red card, but they did lose 2-1 to Bologna. Slightly better, weirdly, from Verona. But they did, still ultimately lose. And Roma beat Empoli 1-0. Sule scored in the first minute, and then nothing else happened. That was it. That was the game. But Roma did get the win. They continue their march. Are they heading for Europe? Who knows? Lazio are currently drawing 1-1 with Juve. There's about 4 minutes left. Tovan has scored and Romagnoli for Lazio. Adam, do we want to talk about Empoli-Roma?
I was just going to say, I think Roma had more chances than you made out. They definitely had efforts. That it's fair to say. You know, they could have scored through Kone, and he had his effort hit the post. I thought Shmorodov, for all the abuse I give him, he actually played quite well against Empoli. Maybe it's just Empoli. That's all it was.
We've not talked about his Europa League winner yet either. I put a message on the WhatsApp and none of you has replied to me, you bastards. I was like, come on, he's just done it.
No, I'll give him some credit in this game against Empoli and his midweek performance in Europe. He did really well. But yeah, no, it was. I think Roma, you can arguably say now, are in a great bit of form that can push them up further. You know, with that victory, it takes them over Fiorentina in the standings right now by a solitary point. I was looking. And then if you look at it now, so Bologna currently are 4 points ahead of them. And then you've got Lazio, as it currently stands, 5 points ahead of them. So if I'm not mistaken, and I'm going to just double check the fixtures, I think Lazio and Roma have still got to play each other. Yeah, they do. Sunday, April the 13th, they play each other. But Roma, you know, this easy run that we alluded to gets a little bit harder in about 2-3 weeks' time. They are at home to Juventus, then away to Lazio, before they're at home to Hellas Verona, and then away to Inter last day of the season. So that could be the part of the season that we actually see Roma, you know, where they need to get the wins. But yeah, a lot of credit to them because, you know, that run, if I'm not mistaken, it's been at least, was it 14 victories, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, listener, we should be more prepared for this. 7, 8, 9, 10 victories in what seems like the last 15 games. It's amazing.
Incredible. Well, that Inter-Roma game at the end of the season is already looking pretty tasty because it looks like there'll be a lot riding on it for both teams. So that is looking pretty good, that one. But that is the Serie A weekend. Goals everywhere. So many headlines. We loved it. We hope you did too, listener. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to look at this week's European action and we'll see if we can get Andrea excited about the Conference League. Wish us luck. Benvenuti, bentornati. It's time to look at all the European action coming your way, starting in the Men's Champions League this time, as Inter take on Fiorentina. Inter currently 2-0 up. Maybe this is an opportunity to rest a few players and see if they can get the job done. I think they should be okay there. And elsewhere we have, that is all of the Italian interest. Oh yeah, they're all doing terribly in Europe, aren't they? In the Europa League, we have Roma. They will be taking on, where's it gone? Athletic Club. Shomurodov, as we previously mentioned, getting a huge winner midweek last week. Can they see the job out in Bilbao? That's going to be a massive game there. I really enjoyed the first leg. I thought that was a very, very good game. And Lazio take their 2-1 lead home against Victoria Pilsen. Again, they'd be expecting to get the job done there, I think. And then heading into the Conference League, currently 3-2 down, I think it is on. Yes, it is 3-2, but it's at home. It's at home, Andrea. Can you do it? You've got to do it at home. Come on, believe.
No faith. I think they lose. Yeah, genuinely, I think they lose.
Was it that bad in the first leg?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
It's been bad for the last 10 games, but yeah. No, I don't know. I just think that they're going to be more up for it because for them, they have a bit of form in the actual European fixtures. In their league, though, they're not doing that great, so they kind of mirror us in that sense. But I just think in that first leg they looked up for it.
Right.
If it's the same mentality in the second leg, they win. I think they win. They've got quality. I think on the counter they can win with Tete out on wide. I think they win.
Can I just ask, Andrea, did Karos Swiderski also score for Hellas Verona against Fiorentina
Earlier in the season?
earlier when he was on loan from FC Charlotte?
Possibly, yeah. Actually, I'm trying to remember.
Because he scored a stunner, Rory. You have to go and check it out if you haven't.
I'm going to go find that one.
Yeah.
Absolute stunner against Fiorentina. But I want to say he did score against Fiorentina for Hellas Verona when he was on loan last season.
Kind of rings a bell, but I'm
so,
not sure.
Yeah, just wonder if he's in for his hat-trick now.
Was unbelievable. His goal was unbelievable.
Broken clock's right twice a day.
I didn't even
happens every so often.
I just switched the game on as well, and I was like, fair enough. Have it.
It's not all day.
Yeah.
But Adam, is there a game you're particularly looking forward to in these Europa runs? I think Roma Bilbao is the one to look out for, right?
Yeah, I'm genuinely looking forward to that. I think two sides that obviously like to play football, I would say, arguably. I think everyone's looking forward to Nico Williams to see what he can do on the day as well. So, yeah, I think it's going to be phenomenally set up for that day in the Stadio Olimpico. And let's see what Roma can do. A lot of pressure, I think, and I feel it feels like that for Ranieri. But yeah, what a incredible effort considering how they started this season and the amount of managers they've gone through. Phenomenal that he's managed to rescue this.
It feels like 10 years ago De Rossi was in charge. It feels like so long ago.
Time.
It feels so long ago. But Adam, take us through next week's Serie A matches. It all starts really with Inter Atalanta, but take us through them.
Yeah, we'll start through round of 29 fixtures with Friday's fixture starting off at 7:45 p.m. UK time. Genoa hosting Lecce. Before we then move into Saturday's game starting at 2 p.m. Starting off with Monza at home to Parma. Then we've also got Udinese at home to Hellas Verona before we move into the 5 p.m. kickoff times where we've got Milan at home to Como. And then at 7:45, a thriller for everyone. It's Torino at home to Empoli where no one will be watching that. So we then move into Sunday's fixtures, starting off at 11:30 a.m. Venezia at home to Napoli. Before at 2 p.m. we've got Bologna at home to Lazio. At 3 p.m. we've got Roma at home to Calgary. Before at 5 p.m. we've got Fiorentina at home to Juventus. And then, as you allude to rightly, Rory, at 7:45 p.m. we've got Atalanta at home in Bergamo to Inter. And that is your round of 29 games.
That Sunday is looking pretty interesting. I really like that. Should be an absolute banger of a day. And then, but listener, because the football never ends, we've also got international call-ups coming. We wanted to very quickly names that we expect to be in the or surprise names we expect to be in the squad. I'm going to quickly snap up Zortea. I think he deserves a call. Maybe Andrea, do you think he's going to get a call up?
Yeah. Sorry, you took my one straight away. So
that's why I got in there first.
Yeah, it's the main one I thought of.
Yeah. But Adam, was there any other names that you think that we could be surprised by?
Yeah, there has been talk, and I don't know if it'll be too soon for this particular call-up stage, but Santiago Castro from Bologna being talked about maybe naturalizing him into the Italy national squad because he's doing so well for Bologna. The other one that I've been really kind of a little bit vocal of on the pod, but also been liking his performances again for Calgary, Roberto Piccoli.
I thought you were going to say Lorenzo Luca.
No. Piccoli has been really impressive. I don't know if you saw his goal this weekend and previous weekend as well. He's deceptively quite quick. He holds up the ball, gets the ball direct, runs at defenders. I think he terrorizes defenders. Probably not getting enough goals to his name, so to speak. But he could be an outsider. Genuinely, I feel, given the form of the kind of Italian strike force at this moment in time, Moise Kean was kind of linked alongside Matteo Retegui. I don't know if necessarily we've seen the best of Keane in recent games, but I think he's still quality. And I just think as an outsider to this whole scenario, group of players, someone that can add something different. And yes, I do like Luca, but I think if I was to give the balance, I think Piccoli gives him a chance. So, yeah, there could be two options there potentially. Let's see. What about you, Rory?
Yeah, I just think Zortea has been the one that stood out really, and we've talked about it a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago. I don't know. Of just maybe his output this year has been ridiculous for a Cagliari team that have been good. They've been okay, but he's really, really stood out. I think he probably deserves a shout. I would quite like to see Luca get called up just to see, because he's such a unique profile of striker and such that he could cause problems in tournaments if you've got a player like...
Sure.
I don't think... But like that kind of Peter Crouch vibe where it's like, how the hell do you defend against this? Kind of like, I feel like he could be a really good option to have him comfortable in the squad and be like, just give you such a different dimension. But Andrea, do you think his fairly public kind of dramas could see him not called up?
No, I think it will be ignored eventually if Spalletti does want to pick him. I think otherwise we'll send like Chiellini to like have a go at him or something. That's what will happen, so it'll be fine. Bring back someone to shout. But I was just gonna say for my one, I was just thinking of just to add, I was thinking even why not Zappa as well for Cagliari. It's probably a way more out of shot compared to Sortea, but I think he's been just as good. It's obviously Sortea's had more of the headlines, but also just for the appreciation of his performances, I think Caprile, just as a backup goalkeeper, just he's not going to play, but at least just to be around it again, and stuff. I think he deserves it, and I think but knowing Spalletti, Provedel will be there, so.
One more player to the mix, Cambiaghi from Bologna. I've been really impressed by his form in recent games as well. He's been someone that's come off the bench, assisted, been in and about. He can play in a multitude of different positions, which might suit the thinking there as well. So another one there.
Nice. Well, lots of options for Luciano. We'll see who he goes for. But listener, that is all this week. As always, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it so much that you choose to spend your time with us. It does mean the world to us. Please do go check out the Premier League episode. We're about to find out how fun that'll be. It's going to be a great one. Don't worry about it. There's loads to talk about. On social media, you can find us everywhere at Anglo-Italian Pod, apart from on Twitter, where we're at Italian Anglo Pod. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe button down here. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, and I know the majority of you are, can you please give us a review and a rating? We are not going to stop mentioning it until somebody does it. So this is on you now, listener. It is directly on you. But we will see you again next week. Guys, anything to say before I send them home?
No, that's it. Enjoy your football.
Thanks, guys. Ciao. A dopo.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.